Welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving into the lives of two legendary warriors, El Cid and William Wallace.
Two figures who, I think it's safe to say, really shaped the destinies of their nations, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. We'll be exploring their incredible stories, their military achievements, and how they became such iconic figures.
In their respective countries.
Right, so we're going beyond just the battles and the bloodshed.
Right.
We'll be looking at the historical context,
Yeah.
the political intrigue,
Absolutely.
and the really complex characters behind these legendary names.
Yeah, and it's fascinating how both of them rose during periods of, well, intense conflict.
Yeah.
El Cid, right, in Spain, you had the Reconquista going on.
Centuries of struggle between Christian and Muslim kingdoms.
Exactly, a really turbulent time.
And then you have William Wallace in Scotland
Yeah.
fighting against English domination.
Really a fight for freedom.
So first up, we have El Cid. Now, his real name, just to get this out of the way,
Right.
was Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar.
A bit of a mouthful.
Not as catchy as El Cid.
No, definitely not.
But he wasn't born into royalty or anything like that.
No, he wasn't.
So how did he rise through the ranks? What do we know about his early life that might give us some clues about the leader he'd become?
Well, just imagine 11th century Spain. I mean, this was the time of the Reconquista, right?
Yeah.
Constant tension,
Yeah.
constant threat of conflict.
It was a crucible.
Yeah, absolutely. And for someone of El Cid's social standing, he would have received extensive military training.
So swordsmanship, horsemanship, all that.
All of it, yeah. But it's clear from the sources that he had these innate leadership qualities that really set him apart.
And speaking of setting him apart, there's this story about his war horse, Babieca.
Oh, yeah, Babieca.
Now, this wasn't some magnificent steed from the get-go.
Right.
I mean, Babieca was initially considered, well, kind of weak and unimpressive.
Really? I didn't know that.
But El Cid saw potential where others didn't. He trusted his gut, and that trust paid off on the battlefield many times over.
That's a great story. I mean, it really speaks to his character, doesn't it? Seeing value where others don't, you know?
Yeah.
Challenging assumptions.
Defying expectations, which is a theme that kind of runs throughout his life.
Yeah.
And his relationship with the Castilian crown is a perfect example of that.
Oh, absolutely.
Because things get a little messy there. After King Sancho II, who El Cid served, was assassinated,
Right.
the new king, Alfonso VI, came to power.
Right.
And let's just say they weren't exactly the best of friends. What caused that rift? Was it just a clash of personalities?
I mean, there's always an element of that in these kinds of situations,
Yeah.
right? But it was more than that.
Yeah.
There was a lot of political maneuvering.
So like backstabbing and scheming and all that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Remember, El Cid was a rising star.
Yeah.
Incredibly skilled military leader.
His reputation was growing.
And that breeds jealousy, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
Other nobles felt threatened.
By his influence.
Exactly. So they started whispering lies,
Oh, wow.
accusing him of disloyalty, corruption,
Oh, man.
hoping to poison the king's mind against
And
him.
El Cid was not one to just sit back and take it.
He had a strong sense of justice.
A defiant streak.
Yeah. And ultimately, this clash of wills led to his exile.
He was exiled.
He was.
And he even led a military campaign without Alfonso's permission.
That's right.
I mean, that's a huge power move.
It really is.
So here he is, exiled, stripped of his lands and titles.
Yeah.
How does a guy in that situation not only survive, but thrive?
That's where things get really interesting. Exile, usually it's a downfall.
Right?
But for El Cid, it was like a springboard.
Really?
It was a new chapter.
Yeah.
He became a mercenary, offering his military skills to, well, the highest bidder.
So he was basically a gun for hire.
In a sense, yes.
Yeah.
But here's where the historical context gets really fascinating.
Yeah.
He ends up working with Muslim rulers.
Muslim rulers.
Yeah. He even fought alongside the king of Zaragoza.
Wow.
Yeah.
That really challenges the whole black and white narrative of the Reconquista, doesn't it?
It does. It wasn't just Christians versus Muslims. There were alliances,
Yeah.
rivalries.
Shifting power dynamics.
Exactly.
It was a lot more complex.
Much more complex.
And El Cid's willingness to work with Muslim rulers, that shows his pragmatism.
He was a pragmatist, for sure. He understood that survival and even success meant looking beyond just religious and cultural divides.
And during these mercenary years, he doesn't just survive, he excels.
Oh, yeah. He racks up some really impressive victories against Aragonese and Catalan forces.
Really showing his military genius.
Yeah. Even his enemies couldn't deny it.
So we have this exile Castilian nobleman,
Yeah.
leading Muslim armies to victory, proving his worth on battlefields all across Spain. I mean, what a turn of events. What brings him back into the fold, so to speak?
Well, it's a classic case of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. The Almoravids, a powerful Berber dynasty from North Africa, they invade the Iberian Peninsula.
And they pose a threat to both Christians and Muslims.
Absolutely. They were a formidable force.
And Alfonso VI, facing this new enemy,
Right.
he has to swallow his pride.
He realizes he needs El Cid.
He needs his military brilliance.
Absolutely.
So it's back to Spain for El Cid.
Yes.
What's his mission this time around?
Alfonso tasks him with capturing Valencia.
Valencia.
It was a strategically vital city.
Okay.
After a long and difficult siege, El Cid succeeds.
He takes the city.
He does. But instead of just absorbing it,
Right.
he establishes this really unique system of governance.
What do you mean?
A blend of Christian and Muslim laws and customs.
Wow.
It became a haven of peace and coexistence.
That's pretty remarkable, especially considering it was the middle of the Reconquista.
It really is.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder what could have been if this model of coexistence had prevailed.
Yeah.
But, things don't always end happily ever after. The tension with Alfonso never fully goes away,
Even though El Cid was loyal.
despite his loyalty and his service.
He rules Valencia for 5 years, though, right?
He does, cementing his reputation as, a brilliant military strategist and a just ruler.
Yeah.
He dies in 1099.
But that's not where his story ends, is it?
Not at all.
Yeah.
In fact, you could argue that's where the really interesting part begins.
His death kind of marks the beginning of his transformation
From a historical figure.
into a legend.
Exactly.
And that's what's so fascinating about El Cid, that blurring of history and myth.
Right.
But before we dive into the legend of El Cid Campeador, let's shift our focus north
All right.
to the rugged lands of Scotland.
Okay.
And the story of another legendary warrior, William Wallace. Are you ready for this?
I am. Let's go.
Yeah.
From the sun-drenched battlefields of Spain, we travel to the highlands of Scotland.
Okay, so a very different setting.
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
a very different kind of landscape.
Very much so. And it's here, in this land of mist and mountains, that the story of William Wallace unfolds.
And it's a story set against a backdrop of English oppression, a fight for freedom.
Exactly.
Now, unlike El Cid, who came from a noble family, William Wallace's origins were much more, well, humble.
Yeah, it wasn't born into privilege or power.
So how did this, seemingly ordinary man become this national hero,
Right.
a symbol of Scottish resistance?
Well, his story is a reminder that heroes can come from anywhere.
Yeah.
He was raised in a family that was very much steeped in Scottish traditions, a strong sense of patriotism.
That love for their homeland.
Exactly. Now, the exact details of his early life are, a little bit murky,
Okay.
but we know that he saw firsthand the injustices inflicted upon the Scots by English rule.
So this wasn't just some abstract idea of freedom for him.
Oh,
This
yeah.
was personal.
Very personal. This desire for freedom, it was deep-seated.
Okay, so that sets the stage. But were there any specific events that really ignited his fight for freedom?
There's a tragic turning point in 1297.
Okay.
The murder of Wallace's wife, Marion Bradefeud, by English soldiers.
Oh, wow.
And this act of brutality,
Yeah.
it transformed his personal grief into a burning desire for revenge.
And a fierce determination to liberate Scotland.
Exactly.
So a very powerful catalyst for rebellion.
Absolutely. The personal becomes political.
Yeah. So how did Wallace channel this grief,
All right.
this rage, into action?
Right.
I mean, did he have any military experience to draw on?
Well, he wasn't formally trained as a military strategist or anything,
Right.
but he had this natural understanding of warfare
Okay.
and a keen awareness of how to use the terrain to his advantage.
He understood the lay of the land.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he knew that the Scots couldn't match the English in terms of sheer numbers or resources.
They had to be smarter.
They had to be. And that meant adopting a different approach.
So he turned to guerrilla warfare.
That's right. Hit-and-run tactics, ambushes, using the rugged terrain of Scotland as their ally.
Classic underdog strategies.
Absolutely. The dense forests,
Right.
the steep valleys,
Yeah.
the unpredictable weather, it all worked in their favor.
And it proved to be surprisingly effective.
Oh, very much so.
Uh,
Especially against these larger, heavily armored English forces
yeah.
who were used to fighting on open battlefields.
Not in the Highlands of Scotland.
Not at all.
So these early successes, they must have been really crucial in galvanizing Scottish resistance and establishing Wallace as a leader.
They were huge.
But guerrilla warfare can only take you so far.
That's true.
There's always that threat of a full-scale confrontation.
Right.
And that's where the Battle of Stirling Bridge comes in.
Exactly. The Battle of Stirling Bridge in 1297, this was a pivotal moment.
Okay.
It was a testament to Wallace's tactical brilliance.
Tell me more about this.
Okay, so the English army,
Yeah.
they were confident.
They had the numbers.
Right. And they were marching towards Stirling Castle. Okay. Their goal was to crush the rebellion. All right. And their route took them across this narrow wooden bridge spanning the River Forth.
Okay, I see where this is going.
Right.
It's a classic bottleneck scenario.
It is.
I mean, I can just imagine the tension as these English troops are marching onto this narrow bridge,
Right.
completely unaware of what awaits them.
Yeah. Wallace and his men, they waited patiently.
They let a large portion of the English army cross.
They did.
Huh.
And then they launched their attack.
Oh, man.
The Scots, fueled by their hatred of the English, inspired by Wallace, they fought with incredible ferocity.
And the English? They were trapped.
They were trapped on the bridge, unable to maneuver effectively.
They suffered heavy losses.
They did. It was a decisive victory for the Scots.
A victory that echoed throughout Scotland.
Oh, absolutely. And it sent shockwaves through England.
I bet it did.
This victory, it cemented Wallace's status as a national hero.
He became a symbol of hope.
Of resistance. And it led to his appointment as Guardian of Scotland.
Wow, that's a huge accomplishment.
It is. From commoner leading a band of rebels to Guardian of Scotland.
That's incredible. But his time as Guardian, it was marked by challenges.
It was. There were a lot of internal divisions within Scotland.
Okay, so different clans with their own loyalties and rivalries.
Exactly. And it often undermined their efforts to present a united front against the English.
Yeah. I mean, it's one thing to fight an external enemy, but
Right.
when you're also dealing with internal strife,
Yeah,
it can be very difficult to succeed.
it can. And these internal divisions, they played a major role in his downfall.
At the Battle of Falkirk.
Exactly.
What went wrong for Wallace there? Did the English just learn from their mistakes at Stirling Bridge?
Well, the Battle of Falkirk in 1298, it's a stark contrast to Stirling Bridge.
Okay.
At Stirling, you see Wallace's tactical brilliance.
Yeah.
But at Falkirk, you see the limits of his leadership.
Okay, so what happened?
King Edward III, he personally led the English army this time.
He was not taking any chances.
He wasn't. And he brought longbowmen.
Archers.
Right. Who could rain down arrows from a distance.
Devastating.
It was.
Yeah.
And this was a tactic that Wallace's forces were completely unprepared for.
They didn't have an answer for that kind of firepower.
No, they didn't. And the internal divisions within Scotland,
Oh, right. We were talking about that.
they played a significant role. Some Scottish nobles, they were more loyal to Edward than to their own nation.
They betrayed Wallace.
They did. Some refused to fight alongside him. Others actively sabotaged his efforts.
Wow, that's rough.
It was a betrayal that, combined with the English longbowmen, turned the tide of the battle.
In Edward's favor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a really heartbreaking turn of events.
It is. Wallace, the hero of Stirling Bridge, brought down by a combination of, well, external military might and internal betrayal. What happened to him after this defeat? Did he manage to escape?
He resigned as Guardian of Scotland.
He did.
He recognized that the divisions within Scotland,
Yeah.
they were crippling the resistance.
Oh, okay.
So he went back to guerrilla warfare, leading these raids against English forces, becoming almost a phantom-like figure.
But his luck ran out eventually.
It did. In 1305, he was betrayed.
Again.
Yeah, by a Scottish noble loyal to Edward and captured.
Betrayal. It's a
And
recurring theme in these stories, isn't it?
It is. El Cid faced betrayal from envious nobles.
Yeah.
And now Wallace falls victim to treachery within his own ranks.
What was his fate?
He was taken to London.
To face trial.
Yeah, a show trial for treason, orchestrated by Edward to make an example of him.
But even in chains, facing certain death, I mean, Wallace remained defiant, right?
Absolutely. He refused to acknowledge Edward's authority.
He wouldn't plead for mercy.
He wouldn't. He declared that he was no traitor to Scotland,
He had fought for the freedom of his people.
and he would face death without fear.
What a powerful testament to his courage and conviction.
It is.
But I'm assuming Edward wasn't exactly swayed by this?
No, he wasn't.
What sentence was handed down?
Wallace was publicly executed on August 23, 1305, in London.
It was a brutal execution.
It was a gruesome display of power meant to intimidate the Scots and extinguish any hopes of rebellion.
But it backfired, didn't it?
It did. Wallace's death, it didn't crush Scottish resistance. It fueled it.
He became a martyr.
He did. His story inspiring future generations to continue the fight for freedom.
It's often said that martyrs create more converts than preachers.
That's true.
And in Wallace's case, his brutal execution, it turned him into this symbol of Scottish defiance.
Right.
A rallying cry for those who yearned for independence.
Yeah.
But how did his story, rooted in 13th century Scotland, transcend its historical context?
Yeah.
How did this once obscure figure become a legend whose name is still spoken with such reverence today?
That's a really good question. And I think the answer lies in the power of storytelling. Wallace's life, with its dramatic arc of triumph, betrayal, sacrifice, it had all the elements of a classic hero's journey.
Right.
And over time, his story was embellished, it was romanticized, it was passed down through generations, becoming part of the very fabric of Scottish identity.
It's like his story tapped into something universal.
Right.
This longing for freedom, a yearning for heroes who fight for what's right.
Absolutely.
And of course, we can't forget the impact of popular culture, especially the movie Braveheart.
Oh, yeah.
Which brought his story to a global audience.
It did.
Oh.
Now, while it took some liberties with historical accuracy, it really captured the spirit of Wallace's defiance, his passion for freedom.
Those powerful visuals, the emotional impact, I mean, it really cemented his place in popular imagination.
Absolutely.
So we have these two legendary warriors, El Cid and William Wallace, both fighting for their homelands, both facing betrayal and adversity. And they both become these symbols of resistance, of national identity. It's incredible how their stories, separated by time and geography, resonate with those same themes of courage, leadership, the human desire for freedom.
Yeah.
But what does all this mean for us today?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah. How can we connect these stories to our own lives, to our own understanding of the world?
It really is. It's amazing how these stories from, centuries ago still have this power to captivate us, inspire us.
It really is. So what do you think it is about these figures like El Cid and William Wallace that continues to draw us in?
Well, I think, they embodied these certain universal values that resonate across time and cultures.
Like courage, determination.
Right. The willingness to fight for what you believe in.
Yeah.
And those qualities, I think they speak to something deep within us, right? I mean, we admire those who stand up against injustice, who challenge the status quo, even when the odds are stacked against them.
Yeah, it's like their stories remind us that we all have this potential for greatness.
Right.
That we can choose to be courageous.
Absolutely. Even in the face of adversity. But their stories also highlight the complexities of leadership,
Oh, yeah.
and the challenges of navigating those power dynamics.
For sure. I mean, neither El Cid nor William Wallace were perfect heroes, right?
No, not at all.
They made mistakes.
Right.
They faced betrayals. They grappled with difficult choices.
They did. El Cid, for example, operating within that really complex political landscape of the Reconquista, he chose pragmatism over ideological purity.
Right.
He forged alliances that defied those conventional norms.
Yeah. His willingness to work with both Christian and Muslim rulers, it kind of makes us rethink that simple, good guys versus bad guys view of history.
It does. It shows us that those lines between us and them, they're often blurred, especially during times of conflict.
Right. And William Wallace, although a charismatic leader, he ultimately struggled to overcome those internal divisions that plagued Scotland.
He did. And his story reminds us that even the most inspiring leaders can be held back by political infighting,
Yeah.
the self-serving agendas of those in power.
It really underscores the importance of unity,
Right.
collaboration, especially when you're facing a common enemy.
Absolutely.
But despite their flaws, their setbacks, both El Cid and William Wallace left behind a legacy that continues to inspire. So how do you think their stories continue to shape our understanding of history and even our own values today?
Well, for one, they serve as these powerful reminders that individuals, even those from, humble beginnings, can make a huge impact on the course of history.
Yeah, they challenge us to really examine our own values.
They do.
Think about what we stand for, what we're willing to fight for.
Exactly. It's like they offer us this blueprint for courageous leadership.
Right, and reminding us that true leadership isn't about, wielding power over others. It's about inspiring them,
Yeah.
motivating them to work together towards a common goal.
Exactly. And their stories also highlight the importance of perseverance, even in the face of defeat. I mean, both El Cid and William Wallace, they faced setbacks, betrayals, moments of despair, but they never gave up on their fight.
Right.
And their unwavering commitment, it serves as an inspiration to us all.
It reminds us that even when things seem impossible, we can't lose hope.
We can't.
And maybe most importantly, their stories remind us that our actions, no matter how small they may seem, can have a ripple effect.
Absolutely.
Inspiring others, shaping the world around us.
Right.
We may not all be legendary warriors, but we can all choose to live with courage, with integrity, with a commitment to making the world a better place. What a powerful thought to end on.
It is. The echoes of El Cid and William Wallace's footsteps, they continue to reverberate through history, reminding us of the enduring power of courage, determination, and that unyielding desire for freedom.
Yeah, their stories offer valuable lessons for us all.
They do.
Regardless of our time or place, so the next time you face a challenge, remember their examples. Remember their courage, their resilience, and their unwavering commitment to their ideals. And ask yourself, how will you choose to make your mark on the world? That's all the time we have for this deep dive. We hope you've enjoyed this journey through history. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.